It should be. Okay, so 3, 2, 1. No, hold
Welcome
up.
to the umbrella. Okay. All right. This guy.
Okay. So are we gonna say it at the same time? That's why I wanted to clear up before.
Alright. Since you want to be like this, introduce it yourself.
Are we? Are we gonna do it together or no? Like,
No, you do it.
okay. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Umbrella Corporation Files podcast, where, you know, I am your host. I guess me and Corey are technically your hosts for today. This is a first pilot episode type situation going on here, so we'll just see how this goes. Okay, so I am Wantel. You know, some call me Juan, but you can call me Wonton Soup, as I shall be recognized as here. And Corey, do you mind introducing yourself?
I don't mind introducing myself, actually. I am Corey. I don't do anything. That is it. That is all.
Yeah, I guess so. So me and Corey have both come to like a kind of an agreement that we both have some sort of, you know, like love for Resident Evil, in some way.
It's kind of a love-hate relationship, really.
Yeah. I can agree on that one. I feel like I'm the one out of the two of us that likes it more than the other, but I digress. So, I guess we could actually start with like what introduced us into the series, our like first interaction with Umbrella, or like not just Umbrella, but the secrets of the Resident Evil universe.
I think the first time I ever heard or seen anything of Resident Evil, it was in like a YouTube video.
That is also the same thing with me. It was Resident Evil 4, or actually technically it was probably one of the movies and then Resident Evil 4. But
You saw the movies before the games?
I believe so, actually. And a lot of people would be very disappointed with that. But I do have more of a love for the video games than I do the movies. But, you know, cause there's some differences and stuff there. So the introduction, let's just do something to introduce people who have not seen this before or heard of Resident Evil before. Even if you do, you're not familiar with it. Resident Evil is a pretty action-packed puzzle game kind of series that involves a lot of zombie shooting, some action scenes, stuff like that, kind of like really fun. It varies from what game you decide to play. Like Resident Evil 6 plays really different from the first game.
Yeah, all the Resident Evil games are all over the place. There's tons of different ways they play.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if there's a Resident Evil mobile game, which I think there is. Actually.
I believe there's some adaptation of a Resident Evil mobile game.
That does not surprise me.
It might be off-brand, but it's something. I'm sure there is an on-brand one as well. So the beginning of the series starts out with this kind of police force team going into this mysterious kind of like woods area that us as the consumers of this do not understand, or like players rather, do not understand what's going on here. We enter into this mysterious mansion after being attacked by what appears to be rabid dogs, and the series continues on from there. You know, going from Africa to the Arctic, there's a lot that happens.
Went to Africa.
Yeah. Like that's actually Africa's a really important part to the universe. But so let's get into, like, speaking of the movies and stuff like that, they also, that's another thing. Like, there's a lot of things that happen between the two, And they actually go to Africa in one of the movies as well. I wouldn't even say Africa, but it is reminiscent. It's like reminiscent of the 5th game where they go to Africa, and that is Resident Evil 3. Sorry, Resident Evil 3, the movie, which is called Extinction. So I think that what we're gonna get into here is kind of looking at those little differences between the two, and comparing it and like seeing what makes Resident Evil great as in general, what makes it bad, what makes it, you know, Resident Evil. Why so many people have fallen in love with it. Okay, so the topic of today is going to be comparing the movies to the series, the video game series. Kind of, sort of all types of media tied into this one. But for the most part, it's going to all link back to Resident Evil, generally. Is there anything you want to start off with in particular, Corey?
I completely forgot they went to Africa, so we can probably start with that.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not too into the series to like I know everything that ever happened in Resident Evil, but I do remember seeing a few clips, snippets of them in Africa. It just being confused.
yeah. That's just how that's just how Resident Evil is in general. Like, everywhere. They even end up in, like, some sort of Japan or Tokyo. Anyways.
I remember that. It was Beijing, right?
Somewhere... Actually, they ended up there in the movies and in the games. Both. So... let's start with Resident Evil 3, which actually might be what people consider one of the worst movies of Resident Evil, because that there is kind of where it started to diverge from the video games until they did this really stupid move and brought back some video game characters into the end of the series, which wouldn't have been as bad if it was other random characters, not just video game characters that they used as throwaway. So yeah, there's that. And then you have the beginning of the series, of the movie series and the game series. So Corey, I feel like you're more familiar with well, you're not more familiar than I am, but you're more familiar with the Resident Evil video games, yeah, the first one, than you are the movies. So if you don't mind, just kind of like, yeah.
The first game. I remember the remake, which is the one I've seen most recently, the one I've played most recently, the one I've looked at more recently. It starts with in the remake, it starts with them going to like a trucker stop, right?
That's Resident Evil 2 remake.
Like I said, I hardly remember.
So the one with the mansion, like
oh, that one.
Yeah.
I got it. Resident Evil 2 was in the actual police station.
Yeah.
The mansion was the first game. I'm trying to think of what I remember from the first game.
I believe it started off with, so there's actually a Resident Evil 0 video game as well, which kind of is like a before. Yeah, there is. Yeah, it's a prequel.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Not many people know about it because it wasn't a very good game. It came out shortly after the original remake of the Resident Evil.
That's a weird way to do it.
Yeah, it is. I think they kind of thought of it as they were making it and like realized that there are so many plot holes, which there are also a lot of plot holes in the movies, like considerably a lot of plot holes, because you have some where it's like in the movies where Jill Valentine, who is a very popular character, also ends up being a villain eventually. So what happens is Jill in the second movie, what does she do? Jill is she works for the RPD like she does originally. Actually, Jill Valentine is on the screen right now as we talk about her. She's really popular in the series. This is her look from the second Resident Evil. No, third. Sorry, third Resident Evil remake. She wasn't in the second one, in the second game at least. So, Jill ends up being a good guy in the beginning who helps our main character, our main protagonist, who was made up for the movies, Alice. She helps her navigate through Raccoon City to try and get out of it, which is kind of reminiscent of Resident Evil 3, except the only thing similar about it is that there's one reoccurring character, maybe two, I believe, and then there's Raccoon City. That's the only correlation between the two. And then in Resident Evil 5, the movie, she comes back as a villain who's been bugged, which in the actual Resident Evil 5, she was bugged. Her hair changed color. She was sent to be like this mysterious spy, and nobody found out that that was Jill until she was actually a boss in the 5th game. But it's kind of blatant and out there by the time the 5th movie gets there, and it is completely different. It ends with Jill, with us seeing that Jill's alive. The 6th movie, no, the 5th movie you do end up fighting Jill, but then, no, the 4th movie, sorry, I'm talking about the 4th movie. So the 4th movie does end with Jill, with us seeing Jill, and then in the 5th movie, we end up fighting Jill again in the movies, which is very weird. But she's kind of like a throwaway character there. She doesn't come back after then, and I don't remember if she died or not. I believe she didn't. She just wasn't mentioned after then. But one of my favorite characters is Claire Redfield. She's very reoccurring throughout the series generally. Like, she's pretty consistent throughout the series. There's a plot hole with her too, where she goes missing after a movie, and then it's not said what it's brung up that she was missing in one of the movies, but it wasn't said what she was doing during that time. It could have been a really cool opportunity, but then Claire Redfield in the games, she's not talked about much. She's not there much in the games. She's still consistent. It's just that I don't know, she's not shown as much as I feel like she should.
That is one thing I remember about when I did my research of the actual movies. I remember seeing that instead of like the characters that everyone knows from the actual games, they just put in random characters that never existed as the main characters during half the show.
Yeah, they did do that.
Alice was one of them, and there's a couple other ones.
So, what I do want to address is how, while those two are, like, the series are different, like, they both have their plot holes and stuff like that, but in the end, it's all Resident Evil. Like, whenever you're talking about it, you have, what is it called? You have the action, you have the zombies, you have the, like, weird characters that always are, like, everywhere. The intense, like, finding out things as you go on, like, finding out about the past and the future at the same time. That's something that both does really good. And what actually makes the series pretty great, in my opinion. So,
that's what
that
the
also,
newer games do really well. The newer games are more about puzzles and more about figuring out more about the universe than fighting things and about action. They still have the action elements, and there's still elements where you fight people, but there's less of that and more puzzles and more story.
And to the game's credit, in the beginning, for like the first 3, that's exactly what or rather the first 2. The third one had a little bit of it, but in the remake they cut that out. For the first 2 games, there was a lot of, and even for Code Veronica, which was a game that not many people know about, but it was a really cool one that ties into the lore. Maybe we could, if we do another one of these, we could dive into that deeper, the lore of the franchise. And so yeah, those two have a lot of puzzles in them, But then after that, the third one, the fourth one, the fifth one, and the sixth one is mostly about, you do find a lot of things out, a lot of things out about the world around us. Raccoon City even gets blown up in the third one, which is crazy. It's also comparable to the second movie where that happened as well. But for the most part, they are kind of like, just action, pure action between those. And not as much puzzle as the recent games like Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil 8. When they remade them, when they remade some of the games, they did do a greater job at like emphasizing the puzzle and the runaround of like the RPD. Like, I've watched somebody play Resident Evil 2, the remake, and now I know the Raccoon City Police Department like the back of my hand. In this game, actually, Dead by Daylight, which is where the franchise has recently kind of expanded to other forms of media. This isn't necessarily a different form of media, but this is a different series in general that has been a crossover between the two. And the RCPD just so happens to be a map in this game. And it's directly mirrored after the one in Resident Evil 2 remake video game. And it is really, really, really good. I like it a lot. It's very familiar to me because I've played the game and watched somebody play the game before. So, there's that. And so, there was this article that I had found that was like, kind of going back to what makes things great, like which makes a video game great, what makes a movie great. I had found somebody that, an article by Trevor Betts. I don't think he's very popular. I'd still like to give this guy some credit for his work. And I quoted him, and he said, "Why Resident Evil is still a success over 2 decades later." That was the name of the article. And I believe that this person is actually correct. I mean, even from the first one, like, it's still very well talked about. It's still a very, like, recognizable franchise and pretty popular still. Like I said, even the first game. So, would you want to kind of elaborate on what makes maybe a single player, specifically, kind of horror game great, Corey?
So, going off on a tangent of a different game that I like a lot, a single player game that I have a lot of fun with, and is also very reminiscent of the Resident Evil games, is Uncharted. The Uncharted series is very, very fun. Very similar to Resident Evil in the sense that it's the same thing, but no zombies and more puzzles. I do like solving things, puzzles, the sword. And that game's really good because it puts you into the world perfectly. It immerses you. You can see what you're doing, you know what you're doing, you know why you're doing it.
Oops. My bad. I didn't mean to do that. Okay. So, yeah, that's like a great point. They're similar than you might think, generally because of like this one mechanic that both games are centered around. And they're both great for their own reasons, but the fact that they kind of stay loyal to that one mechanic, which is like kind of puzzles and stuff like that, is what makes it good. And actually, Resident Evil's really good, but I will have to give points to Uncharted for kind of staying more loyal to that. Like, it has a perfect balance of action and puzzles. Another game that also kind of has the same thing, but puzzles in a different way, in a more action-packed way, is Tomb Raider, the Tomb Raider games, which is also kind of comparable to Uncharted in a way. Yes. So, with the person had also said that, like, the author, sorry, Trevor, had was really, he has a very put together article. Everything kind of ran together. There are obvious turning points, smooth sections and stuff like that. And another quote from this article is that moving to a first person's perspective would have been enough of a departure on its own, but Capcom also chose to make the whole game playable in virtual reality at a time when nobody expected or asked them to. In fact, they did so successfully that it's still one of the best examples of of what the platform is capable of. And that also feeds into like a good video game. The video game itself doesn't just have to be good. Like you have a whole bunch of like the forms of media that it comes into, variation, like switching to a first-person perspective versus the over-the-shoulder of the old games, or like pre-rendered backgrounds of the older games. So I think that that was like, like fixed camera angles. That's what's called, with pre-rendered backgrounds. All that good stuff is like the variation that you get between the series, but at the end of the day, it's still great to play in. Yeah. So, what makes a movie great, Corey?
That one is a lot harder to answer.
Yeah, I can agree with that one.
Games are similar in the sense that you play them. You can, there's a set perspective which you view them in. Whereas movies, you can see them in so many different ways. You can hear them, you can listen to them, you can even read the script of the movie to learn more about it.
Yeah. So, like, I think we could each bring examples to the table here, but like as a series of a movie that I think is good and kind of goes into the same horror genre of Resident Evil, although I would say the movies, almost the more horror bits start to come in towards like the very end of the series, which is actually a great movie. I don't think Corey's had a chance to see it yet, but it's a really good movie. But anyways, so the Scream horror franchise is amazing. Like as a general kind of like what do you call it? As a series in general of horror, it does a great job at like it's so self-aware. It reminds me of Resident Evil in a sense and stuff like that. Like the recurring jokes in the franchise, characters, all that good stuff. It's also commenting on the horror genre in general as a series. So I just kind of wanted to go on a little tangent about how great that movie series is. Corey?
I'm trying to think of what my favorite, or what I think is the best movie series is.
That is hard. I just say go off of what's your favorite and why it's your favorite, and also it has to be good. It can't just be your favorite because it's like I guess it is subjective whether something's good or not.
It is good or not, yeah.
But at the end of the day, we can all come together and generally say this movie was all right. This was okay. It's passable, and I would accept it to watch this. That's why I consider it to be like good. It's not just an opinionated thing. Cause like Stranger Things, for example, you could say it's a bad franchise. You cannot like it, but at the end of the day, it is kind of agreeable between a vast majority of people that Stranger Things is, yes, it's good.
My movie, then, that I would say, I've talked about this before, is the Nightmare Before Christmas. Because so many hours of labor, it took 3 years straight to make that movie. It's all done by claymation. You can't even tell for the most part.
Yeah, that's a good point as well, cause like effort put into a movie is also great, but then comes all rounding this back up to the Resident Evil series and the video games. Well, first off, are either of them good? Considerably in their own respective like area and forms of media, are the Resident Evil movies good, and are the Resident Evil video games good? Corey, I'll let you take the video games.
Yeah, I feel like it's a common. I feel like if you asked every person, like one out of every 100 person, one person would say no, they're not good. But most people who play games or who play the Resident Evil games will tell you that the Resident Evil series is just good.
Yeah.
Some people might like it less than others. Some people might love the game series, but most people would tell you it's a good series because it's put together. It lets you know what you have to know. I can't really say the same for movie stuff.
Yeah. Um, I'll kind of take over that. So the movies. My issue with the movies is that, well, that's kind of like the kind of basis here. Is it okay to make a same form of media without like staying so true to the original that like it's a exact replica? And also, is it good? So, as a movie in general, what it's trying to do, it's good. For an action movie, it's good. As a general movie, I'm sorry, and I really do love the Resident Evil movies, but it's just not a good franchise. As like a movies, the way that they built up the characters, I wouldn't even say built up the characters. See, that's like another problem with it. Like the way that things are in the franchise, like I get the recurringness like of everything is still, it all links back around. But if a Resident Evil video game fan, only a Resident Evil video game fan, were watching the movies, then they probably wouldn't
They
really
don't take it.
recognize it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's really different. It doesn't stay true enough to the originals, and that's a good point. I do think that if you're going to do something like what Resident Evil, the movies tried to do, I don't think that making a different form of media for the same franchise and the current current storyline with the same characters and stuff like that, doing the exact same things that they've done before, I don't think that's a great idea. I think that if you're going to do that, you need to change some things around. But what's the point of making something like that kind of reminiscent of the original? So what you could do instead, which I think both of us can agree that this is a better option, is just make something within the same universe inspired by what was already made, while still having
Like a spin-off.
references. Yeah, spin-off. Like having references to the original and stuff like that. Um, which is also why my hopes for the Resident Evil movie, the newest one that's coming out, which is actually supposed to be exactly what I kind of don't want for the series at this point, which is an exact kind of like replica of the first two not movies, sorry, first two games smashed together with actors and actresses that do not look the part. That's also one of my main issues with that. Percy Jackson is like something that immediately comes to mind. Like there's a whole bunch of issues with that, but like the fact that the characters weren't who they were supposed to be bugs me as a fan who's seen what the the characters haven't only been described in the video games, but you can see what they are supposed to look like. You can see their features, you can see their personality, all that good stuff. You can see and experience for yourself with a video game.
You can get away with it more with a source that's from a book or for something you can't visually see. People who play the devil's advocate can say, I guess they might look like that. But if you're copying from something that's just, you can see that, you can see what it is, you can see how they look, it's pretty hard to get away with it.
And don't get me wrong, their appearances and characters like have changed throughout the franchise. I mean, look, Jill right now on screen is a good example of that. But she changed for the better. Her outfit has changed throughout the years. So has Claire, her looks and stuff like that. But in the end, they all are reminiscent of each other. It's an evolution rather than a complete change of character, which is all right with me. And I feel like most video game fans or most Resident Evil fans would be okay if they changed the character up a little bit, because obviously there's nobody who looks exactly like Claire Redfield in real life, or Jill Valentine, or Leon Kennedy, or Chris Redfield. Nobody in real life looks one for one as the video game characters do. They have their certain charm to them as well, um, and I like that a lot. So, yeah. I guess we could actually kind of start to wrap this up, unless there's something more that you want to say.
I did actually. I just remembered a series that did the exact same thing for the Resident Evil movies do, and it's the Mortal Kombat movies.
Uh, I
I
as
don't
a,
think I've ever seen a series that does so poorly with visualizing something that everyone can see within the like Mortal Kombat movies.
I don't even want to start on Raiden. I mean, the newest Mortal Kombat movie, that's something for another day as well. But like that is very comparable to the Resident Evil series, like more closely actually than I thought it would be. Comparing those two one day like would actually be a lot of fun to do. Like maybe that could be another podcast as part of the timeline for this. But I think we're coming to a time, and we're like kind of like spinning. Like we sorry, our time is almost up here. Yeah. So this podcast is probably most likely not always going to contain the same people, and it's also not always going to be about comparisons. I'd like to fit in a little bit of lore sometime into this podcast. After all, it is called the Umbrella Corporation Files. And, well, I hope you guys had a good time listening to this, especially a certain somebody. I guess that's kind of just going to be us signing off in a little bit. Any like last words that you want to say, Corey?
I'm sorry. Really. I wouldn't put somebody in the position to watch the movies. They're not good.
That's fair. That's fair. Maybe we could talk about this extensively another time as well too. This can be like a part one maybe, possibly. But I feel like it's safe to leave it off here. Corey, on the kind of like the catchphrase that I kind of came up with, the spilling umbrella zombies. We can kind of like do you want to do like 3, 2, 1 kind of situation there, and do that?
Not really.
Yes, I think we are. Okay, well, okay, this is how it's gonna go. We're gonna say, this has been the Umbrella Corporation Files podcast, and we're glad that you stuck with us for spilling Umbrella's zombies. We'll catch you later.
That was the exit.
Okay, I guess it's fine. Yeah, no, we don't have to do. You know what? This has been great, everybody. I guess we'll see you later. I don't know how this. Good talk. Yeah. This has been the Umbrella Corporation Files podcast, and we are signing off now.